All right, so what's happening, y'all? I got a question from a viewer on my YouTube. Missy, welcome back, sis. Finally able to get to this. So Missy asks, if there will not be a third temple, can you tell me what Revelation, I'm assuming this is Revelation, chapter 11, verses 1 to 2 means? I know we are the temple now. Also, is that the only place people are getting this third temple business? And of course, Daniel chapter 9, verse 27. So we'll deal with that question first. So yes, this is one of the verses some will go to say, yeah, see, there has to be a third temple because look, John is being asked to measure a temple that at the time he wrote it is not standing. That is, of course, if you accept the late date of Revelation, dating it around AD 94, 95, or 96. I, of course, reject that. That doesn't make any sense. This would make sense, however, if this is being written before AD 70, because John doesn't even mention anything about why he doesn't even question why he's being asked to measure something that's no longer standing. If anything, Revelation 11 verses 1 and 2 prove that this is something earlier. This is written earlier than at the end of the century. Then a measuring rod like a staff was given to me, saying, get up and measure the sanctuary of God and the altar and those who worship in it. There's not enough information here to just assume that this means that there is going to be a third temple. This is a major leap in logic. And if we're going to be honest with ourselves, we'd have to admit that that's exactly what it is. It is an assumption made with very little to no evidence at all. And leave out the court, which is outside the sanctuary, and do not measure it, for it has been given to the Gentiles, and they will trample the holy city underfoot for 42 months. Now, as I've mentioned in the Revelation study, Nero's reign, his tyrannical reign against the Christians did last for 42 months. It started after the fires, and it ended when he died, or at least the pressure let up. The pressure that he was applying on the Christians ended when he died. Not to say that ended persecution of the Christians ultimately, but it eased up for a little bit after his death. But again, in reading these verses up here, I have to ask the question, what here tells you that there's going to be a third temple? And to be real, if folks from the other side are going to be honest with themselves and honest with us, they have to admit nothing says that there's going to be a third temple here. Because as far as John is concerned, the temple is standing and he's being told to measure it. Next, with Daniel 9, verse 27, and he will make a firm covenant with the many for 1 week. Now, I've already said this many times in other videos. The he here is the Messiah, is Jesus. All four of these verses are about the coming of the Messiah, who is Jesus. He is called the Messiah, the Prince. He's called the Prince of the Covenant. He's also called the Prince who will come. That is called being consistent with each and every verse here. When the person decides to say, oh, well, see, now look here, he was talking about the Messiah, but this can't be the Messiah because this firm covenant has to be the peace treaty that he makes with the whole world. Again, where do you see that here? That's not there. The firm covenant is the new covenant. He makes it with the many. I pointed out in the letter to the Hebrews how that language is used. There's even a prophecy given in Isaiah where he will make a covenant with many. Think about it. The old covenant was between God and the Hebrews. The new covenant is between God and the world, all who believe that Jesus is the Son of God, all who trust in him, all who believe the gospel. That is who the many are. You and me, we are the many. And Jesus made that covenant. He firmed up that covenant that week when he went to Jerusalem. But in the middle of the week, he will make sacrifice and grain offering cease. I also pointed out in the letter of the Hebrews that it was said that Jesus' death was once and for all the sacrifice that ended sacrifices and offerings. Because Jesus was that perfect sacrificial lamb, there is no more need, absolutely no more need for any kind of sacrifice or grain offering to continue. To do that, or to want to do that, as the writer to the Hebrews was saying, this is basically making null and void the sacrifice of Christ. You cannot have both. And I do sincerely believe that for the temple to be built again and sacrifice and grain offering be continued, you know what I'm saying? Just so that this Antichrist, the so-called Antichrist, can do whatever people saying he's going to do, that is an abomination. That is blasphemous. And I am convinced that God will not approve of that, nor will he allow that to happen. And on the wing of abominations will come one who makes desolate. Yes, Titus Vespasian came on the wing of abominations, and he made the city and the temple desolate. One that is decreed. In Matthew 24, Mark 13, Luke 21, Jesus is the one decreeing the destruction of the holy city and of the sanctuary. Jesus is decreeing it, guys. Both Jerusalem and the Jews rejected their Messiah in the first century. Therefore, the wrath of God was decreed to be poured out upon them for that. It says it's poured out on the one who makes desolate. Now, I want you guys to be conscious of this little fact here. He says the decree will be poured out on the one who makes desolate. Now, even though Titus brought the destruction, Jesus pronounced the desolation coming long before that, when he was talking to the Jews, to the Pharisees and the chief priests. If you go back to the ending of Matthew 23, what does Jesus say? Behold, your house will be left to you desolate. Boom. There's that word. The language is consistent. Y'all following? Next, he said, do I also think Satan will use these teachings about the 7-year tribulation and temple to his advantage for deceit? You know, honestly, sis, I don't think the devil is behind much of this. You know what I'm saying? I think that people are doing just fine with deceiving each other and being deceived and all of this other stuff. So I don't think he really cares about whether or not people argue about when Jesus is actually returning. You know what I'm saying? If he could have things his way, he wouldn't have anyone looking to Jesus by any stretch of the imagination, whether it be arguing whether or not there's a third temple or otherwise. Yeah. I will say this, though, if a person is basing their salvation, basing their believing in Jesus on the possibility of a third temple or the Antichrist coming or all this other stuff, a rapture, possible rapture, if you're basing, not you, but like if a person is basing their salvation on that, they got other problems. They got way bigger problems than that. You know what I'm saying? That's the least of their problems. They need to understand who Jesus is. They need to understand what it means to actually live for him. Then he said, because we know these teachers and preachers are getting it from seminary schools. Right. So unfortunately, that's just, mainstream seminaries these days. They have gone the way of liberalism. You know what I'm saying? A lot of them actually reject the authorship of Paul, of the pastoral epistles. You know what I'm saying? A lot of these seminaries are given, PhDs in theology and stuff to, you know what I'm saying? Like, lesbians and people confused about their gender and all this other crazy stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like, we can't really trust the seminaries the same way that we could have back in the day. But I will tell you this, there are seminaries that exist that have a reform tradition, that they're not, by any stretch liberal. So, not all is lost on the academic world. The thing is, you got to look for these teachers. You got to look for these theologians that do honest exegesis. You got to look for their materials. Because if you just do Google searches, all the stuff that's going to come up is mostly dispensational. Why? Because that's what's popular. Dispensational and charismatic. That is what's popular today. And that's what people see and think about when they think Christianity. Outside of those two verses, those sections of scripture, there's another section that I'm about to address because another viewer on my TikTok actually brought it up, and that's Zechariah 14. So We're going to get into that next.